listen-only mode.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Ben from SocialAdr, and I'm very excited to have everybody here today and to have Kyle with us. We were just chatting before this started, and I was saying I haven't been on any kind of a webinar in what has to be years. I don't know if we've ever done a SocialAdr webinar. I've done them for a couple of other brands before, but I haven't been on one in ages. So I'm excited to be doing that as well. If you were looking at the page before we started here, there was a couple of pictures. There's Dory Friend on there. I imagine a lot of you probably know who Dory Friend is. She's a really good friend of mine. She's been in the SEO space for a long time. She's pretty well known, and she is one of the founding members of the SEO Intelligence Agency. I imagine a lot of you probably don't know Kyle. I met Kyle at a conference that Dory was putting on a couple years ago, and you know, Kyle's a pretty cool guy. He's pretty smart, as you're going to learn very soon here. But he's not the kind of person who's real in your face and loud and out there. So I think in our industry, he's a little under the radar and a little bit of a secret presence here. So Kyle is an expert on all things SEO, especially when it comes to data-driven analysis. So Kyle's not the type of guy, kind of like me actually, he's not the type of guy that likes to go by things that people believe, right? He doesn't want to take SEO stuff on faith. So he's really big on testing things and proving things and knowing answers for sure, which I think makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what led to this whole SEO Intelligence Agency and figuring out what the truth is about what's working and what's not working and what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And so with that, I'm going to let Kyle hop in here and give himself a little bit more of an introduction and take it away.
All right on. Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here. I love talking SEO. I love doing this sort of stuff, and I really like doing these kind of webinars, and so I really appreciate everyone that's on. Hopefully we can show you some stuff that you'll like and you'll find useful. When we start off, let's start off with a quick poll. Who do you do SEO for? Shooting that poll out to people. Do you do it for yourself? Do you do it for yourself and clients, just clients? Maybe you don't know what SEO is, but if you could let us know, it'll kind of help us also on some follow-up stuff, and we can provide some information on what might be most useful for you. But go ahead and answer that there on that poll. It should have gone on out into the launching it into the poll section, so you can see the A, B, C, D there. Myself and clients, and then nobody's put in what is SEO, so that's a good start. Looks
this
like
is not that webinar.
Yeah. Looks like not too many of you are pure agency side, yourself and maybe clients, and yourself, so that's pretty cool. Almost split there. Very, very cool. And then a small percentage are just agency. Right on. Thank you very much. So we're looking at on SocialAdr, and we tested SocialAdr and kind of how it works. And what I want to do is I want to start off and tell you a little story about a guy named Isaac Newton. So you might know Isaac from his big hits, Gravity, Laws of Motion, and Calculus. But before Isaac was doing all that, he was hitting the British aristocracy party scene in the 1660s. A wild time. It was these sort of parties were meant for genteel folk in order to have an appropriate or respectable place for people of the opposite sex to mingle and meet and greet. And what Isaac ended up doing when he was going to these things was he would kind of dominate the parties, and especially dominate and monopolize the time with the ladies. And he would go in with his stuff, and he'd be science, science, science. Science is the most amazing thing of all time. I should know, I'm kind of inventing it right now. And the ladies would swim. And he would go on and say that the important thing in science is that science can measure anything. Science can quantify anything, and that's an important point, because if you can quantify something, you can then qualify it, which means that you can study it. And so he's going on and on about how great science is because of that. At one particular party, there's this Baron, and he's about had enough of this. And he walks up and goes, Newton, I'm tired of you. I'm tired of your science. Science can't do everything that you say that it can. Science can't measure everything. And Newton's like, yes, it can. No, it can't. Yes, it can. No, it can't. Prove it. Make me. So they place a bet. And we're not exactly sure what the bet was for, but it was clearly not a good thing, because people were like going up to Isaac like, hey man, you can back out of this one. It's a party. We've been drinking. And you just say, yeah, I was just mouthing off. It's not a big deal. And Newton's like, don't worry, I got this, because of a little thing called the scientific method. So the terms of this are that the Baron will go back, he'll talk to his buddies, and they'll come up with something that they think can't be measured, and then Newton has 30 days or until the next party in order to prove that it can be measured. So the Baron goes back, he talks with his buddies, and he comes back out, and he's like, okay, Newton. And he takes a long drag on his cigarette and goes, science cannot weigh the weight of smoke. And you can just hear a pin drop. How can you measure smoke? And Newton's like, I'm on it. So he leaves the party. Fast forward a month, nobody's seen Newton in the entire time. And we get to the party, and he's not there. And the Baron's there, and he's just laughing it up, and everyone's getting kind of nervous. Nobody's seen Isaac for a while. He's not at the party. The party's kind of getting towards the end. Still not there. It's not looking good. And all of a sudden, there's a sound at the back of the party. And in comes Newton, and he's pushing a cart, and there's a tarp over the top of it. And people are like, oh my God, did this guy just invent a smoke weighing machine? And so he pushes the cart into the middle of the room, and everybody circles around. And with a flourish, he pulls off the tarp, and there are just scales. So at this point, the Baron's losing it. He's like, oh my God, this guy's lost it. And Newton then reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a cigar. And the Baron's like, what are you going to do, man? Are you going to like blow on the scales for us? And Newton's like, cool your jets, hang on. So Newton puts the cigar on the scales and says, okay, we can all agree that this cigar weighs 10 ounces. And I'm like, yeah, sure, fine. So then he lights the cigar and he lets it go all the way down to ash, and then he remeasures the ash and says we can all agree that this ash weighs 3 ounces. The weight of smoke is 7 ounces. Mic drop. And Newton's like, ladies, this party bores me, let's go. And he takes all the ladies out of the party with him. So the moral of the story is, aside from the fact that Newton can take your ladies, everything is measurable if you think about it the right way. You know, even Google can be measured. And that's an important idea, that when we're thinking about the algorithm, and we're thinking about what's going on, and we're thinking about what we're trying to do in SEO, it's important to understand that these things can be measured. We just need to think about it the right way. So for me, kind of as an idea of why this is important, I think that the difference between an SEO enthusiast and an SEO pro is that the enthusiast is going to tell you something they just read in MOZ or some other blog. The pro is going to tell you something that they just tested. So in my own practice, I'm a practicing SEO. I do SEO all day, every day. And I'm also the lead SEO for S.I.A, the SEO Intelligence Agency, and I love testing, and that's really what I do. So time for a quick poll. Does anybody test? And what I mean by that is, do you have test sites that you've set up specifically to test things in order to see what's going on in the algorithm? I'm launching that now. Yes, of course. No, they're too time-consuming. I have in the past, but not anymore. All right, super cool. No is kind of the predominant one, but they're almost pretty even, almost a third. Yes, I test. No, I don't. I have, but I don't anymore. That's super cool. All right. Yeah, about 50% of you say that you don't really test, and then it's split between yes and but I used to, but not anymore. Right on. Okay, so types of testing. Usually what you run across are case studies or correlations. Case studies are where you read something where somebody says, okay, I'm going to go and do this, and then they go and do it, and they kind of share their results, and it's a good thing, but it usually doesn't qualify as a scientific test. And the reason is that there are usually too many variables going on. You know, they're testing something within the algorithm that has a lot of other factors in play, like a lot of other websites, for example, and it's very difficult to often reproduce what they've done because they're in a particular niche and there's a lot of other variables going on. One that you see more often than not is a correlation. These are often very good, but the problem with these things is that they often really don't tell you exactly what's going on, exactly what's working or not. They just kind of tell you a consensus of what's seen or not seen. You know, as an example, the Stone Temple Consulting, they agree with the idea that correlations aren't maybe showing you the full picture. What's interesting about this is the quote is, I believe that the mean of individual correlations approach is not providing a complete picture. The thing that was hysterical about that, though, is that in the exact same post, they showed the results of a correlational study that they did showing that links are still effective. And you can check that out. They also pointed to another correlational study warning you not to buy links, which I thought was great, where they're like, you know, a correlation doesn't show you everything, but here's a correlation that we just did, a correlational study. The problem is that people...
Kyle?
Yeah.
Kyle, sorry to jump in. Are we supposed to still be seeing the poll? Or are we on slides now?
Oh, we're on slides. I'm sorry. Can
there
you see?
We go.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Now we can see the poll, or the slides, I mean.
Right on. Part of the problem with correlational studies is that then readers, they read it and then they take it as fact, and they take it as this is what it is, especially when it comes from industry leaders. The problem is when you do SEO for a few years, you start to see that a lot of these are just kind of rehashes or mashups of the last year's kind of mediocre advice. For example, when you see you see a correlational study, often they'll say like, well, these are positive correlations that we see, like many websites have this sort of a factor, but then you'll see like a negative zone. Most ranking sites don't have these things. And you would think then that represents something that is bad to do or something that you shouldn't be doing. It's hard to see what these things are, but this is MOZ's correlational study, and what the stuff on the left are certain factors, and then they give you like a positive and negative correlation, positive to the right, negative to the left. Sites that are ranking do have these sorts of things. Sites that are ranking don't have the other things. What's important though is these two here. The first one is Open Graph, and the second is Schema. And what you're seeing is that they're saying that there's a negative correlation between sites that have Open Graph and Schema and are ranking for particular target keywords. The thing is that in S.I.A. we've actually tested Open Graph and Schema, and we know that both of those will give you a boost in rankings. And we know that because we've tested it. Where I think you can see the issue with that is that, you know, Open Graph, specifically doing it correctly, and Schema, it's kind of advanced stuff. It's not easy to understand. It's not easy to implement, especially Schema from time to time. Or Open Graph, people often miss probably what they need to be doing with it. So it's not in a lot of ranking sites, but that doesn't mean that it's not a ranking factor. But as a result, because there might be difficult aspects of implementation, what shows up in MOZ, it looks like a negative factor, rather than this is actually a ranking thing. It's just a lot of people aren't using it. Another thing is keywords in the domain, and this comes from search metrics. And what they're showing in this graph is that the sites that are winning particular target keywords, you see less and less exact match or partial match domains. Those are domains that contain the keyword in front of the .com. They're saying that that's going down in the top 10 sites for a particular keyword and the top 30 sites for a particular keyword. The thing is that a real reason that there might be a drop in the usage is that industry leaders are saying that they don't work anymore. So as a result, people aren't focusing on that, or that they're not doing that. And then they say in this that the share of keyword domains and search results has decreased continuously in recent years. And then down at the bottom that comes from MOZ, and they even say in their own guide on SEO 101, when choosing domain names, don't focus on keywords. And to back that up, they point to their own correlational studies. What you end up with is kind of this cycle where there's the correlational study, then there's advice to follow, and then there are the Google results. And when you see something like, say, don't do exact match domains or partial match domains, people do them less as a result of following that advice. You see them less in results. So then when they do next year's correlational study, they can show like, oh, there's been a drop in that particular factor that they said maybe you don't need to do, or they're not seeing as much. What perpetuates it even more is that a lot of these studies then ask experts that supplied the information in the first place, what do you think? And then the experts in their opinion provide, well, I think this or I think that, and they often cite correlational studies in order to do that. And what you end up with is like a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of cycle, where there's the correlational study, there's the advice, the experts give their advice that matches that, and then the results from Google reflect that advice. And then when you see these studies, you see like, well, okay, these factors really aren't that prevalent, and it isn't because they are or are not a ranking factor, it's simply because that's what these experts might be doing, and that's the advice that they're giving. What's interesting is you end up with wrong information. That's kind of the bottom line, or information that is unreliable. As a result, a lot of these like search metrics and MOZ and all that, they have tons of followers, and it just perpetuates that cycle. Then when you've got hundreds of thousands of people implementing things that look like a potential negative factor, it returns mediocre SEO. Kind of this is Dory's line, it's the dumbing down of SEO. But to be honest, that's actually kind of good for us, because the idea is that please follow correlational studies. I'd rather test something and know for sure. All right, as a quick poll, we were talking about keywords in domains, and I promised to close the poll appropriately, but do keywords in domains still help ranking? What are your thoughts? Absolutely, no, not anymore, I'm not sure. Most people are going with absolutely, some not anymore, and an equal number, a little bit more not sure. Yeah, and that's fine too. If you do a search on that, like, hey, do keywords in domains work? That's kind of part of what we're trying to avoid as well, getting past opinion on these things. But I'm going to close out this poll. But most of you are like, yeah, absolutely. All right, so how myths kind of get going. This comes from Whiteboard Friday and MOZ from April 29th. So in fairness to MOZ, this isn't from 2006. And the title is 8 old school SEO practices that are no longer effective. And in this Whiteboard Friday, number 6 was exact and partial match key domains don't work anymore. It's a myth. They used to work, but they don't any longer. And then if you look over at Ahrefs, they did a little study, or a case study, if you will, on the term content upgrades, and they got Content Upgrades Pro, which, because Content Upgrades is together, that's an exact match domain. And they point out that while it's ranking well, it doesn't beat one particular site, and so they come to the conclusion is EMD is exact match domain. Is that a strong ranking signal? I don't think so. What's interesting is they actually even double down in that article, and they say, according to our data, the use of exact match keyword in the title, the URL, the H1, or even within the actual content of the page doesn't have a significant correlation with Google rankings. And one kind of take a step back is like, why would they be saying this? And well, it's because Ahrefs sells analytics about links. So they're making the argument for the power of links. And the thing is, like, of course links are a strong thing. And of course they're a ranking factor. But to say that those other things are not significant for Google rankings is just flat wrong. And those are things that we know because we've tested them. We've tested each of those things, and we know that they're a ranking factor. So it becomes really dangerous when you read that sort of thing that says this isn't a significant correlation in rankings. No, that might be true, and that might be true because people aren't using it as much because they're looking at this and they're in that cycle of incorrect data, but that doesn't mean that they're not a ranking factor or that they can help you rank for your target terms. And really that's why we test. That's the whole bottom line. So getting into some SocialAdr results, but I wanted to show you this is how we test. This is how it's done. So again, back to that article of 8 old school things. We actually tested 5 of them that quote unquote don't work, and they all were a positive ranking factor. And when we took the screenshot, 19,000 people had seen this thing. So that's 19,000 people, and nobody happens to go to like a Whiteboard Friday from MOZ. I mean, it's people that are in the industry or people that are trying to do SEO. So that's 19,000 people that just got basically some information that isn't super on point. In the keywords in the domain, so how we set this test up is that we had an exact match domain, and we put it against a partial match, an exact match against a not related, unrelated kind of keyword domain, and an exact match, and a partial match, excuse me, against also a random. In the end, on the results, the exact match beats a partial match, the exact match beats a random, and the exact match, and number 3 was actually, sorry, a partial match beats a random as well. Having the keyword in the URL is a ranking factor. This was an interesting one on title optimization. What they were saying here in this is that a keyword-stuffed meta title will lose to a meta title that's written for the click as clickbait, kind of like an AdWords ad sort of line, rather than just kind of listing out your keywords. When we tested this, we know that the meta title is the #1 on-page factor for your on-page SEO. And so it's really interesting when somebody says don't put keywords in that or don't focus on it, because that is the #1 place to put it. My first thought was, well, maybe something's changed and we don't know. So we tested it once, and of course the keyword stuffed, quote unquote, if you will outrank a artfully written or a message written title. But then it's like, okay, well, the point of the article was that your click-through rate is going to be higher. So then actually we tested click-through rate. And we used a really cool tool called SERP Turkey, which is where you can actually test organic meta titles and descriptions in an environment with micro workers. And what was hilarious is that the keyword stuff meta titles got a higher click-through rate than the ones that were artfully written. And we even used the exact ones that were used in the Whiteboard Friday. Just, we didn't doctor them, which is hilarious. So what that means is that the advice that you're getting in that is don't do this because it's not really a factor, but you should do it this way because you're going to get a better click-through rate, and that's a better factor. But that wasn't even tested, obviously, because the keyword stuffed one in our test got a higher click-through rate. So it's a double loss following that advice. In the handout section, which I think you should be able to see, there we have a few more of those tests from that Whiteboard Friday about page links and also optimizing a multiple pages versus a single page, and you can actually get those results as well. If maybe you saw that Whiteboard Friday, or you'll watch it later, you can see our results on the test there. So what we drive at is single variable testing. We try to isolate things down to testing one thing. The reason is that we basically then get a yes, something's a ranking factor, no, it isn't, or sometimes we get a no, that it's a negative factor. We joke, this isn't rocket science, but it is science, and so it's not anything that's like super heady, but it's controlled. We're looking at single variables so that we can say, like, is this a ranking factor? Yes, it is, or no, it isn't, or no, that's a negative factor. So how do we test single variables? I'm going to take you back to 6th grade real quick. That may or may not have been a fun time for you, but there was some important information in science class, and that's the scientific method. And the first thing is make an observation. And I'm sure that you've done this, where you see something in the algorithm, or you see a site that's ranked in a particular way, or something strikes you, and you're like, that's interesting, and you see it. You really want to form a hypothesis. Why is that doing that, or why does that happen, or how does that work? And then you want to gather data. You want to test that idea. Once you've tested it, you want to critique and analyze your data. Just because, let's say you had a hypothesis that this was going to happen, and then you tested it and that actually worked, that doesn't necessarily mean that you nailed it. You need to look at how you tested it. Are there problems? Did you have variables that slipped in, that sort of thing, and really critique what you've done and give it a strong think. From there, refine, alter, and retest your hypothesis. Do some variations on that test, figure out maybe where things may have gone wrong, but then also if you get results, duplicate those results. Doing a test one time isn't super great. You want to run it 2, 3, 4 times or whatever is reasonable, and make sure that you're getting repeatable results. And then once you've got that, you can develop a theory, and that's the fun part, where you can say like, hey, look, this is a thing, or this is not a thing, and here's why. Very simple experiment structure, and how that works is you want to create a control group and a test group. The control group is basically nothing's being done to them, and the test group is where you're doing something. If you just had a test that had 2 pages, basically the control group is the one page that nothing's being done to, and the test page would be the one that you're introducing one factor to. A very important point is to eliminate variables, and how you do that is basically by doing things exactly the same between your pages, except for that one thing that is that you're experimenting on. That way you know that one item, the one difference between those two, is a factor or not. Last thing is keep accurate records, and this is probably the hardest and most boring part of the whole thing, but it's important to know what's going on and when you do things and all that, so to keep your tests valid. All right, so how do you do this in SEO? Because that's the thing, like, okay, I get it. I understand how tests work, but now we're talking about the algorithm and there's so much going on there. How do we do this? And step number 1 is you want to start with a fake keyword. The goal is that you're finding a keyword that does not exist in the algorithm. I use keyword generator, soybomb.com/tricks/words, but you can do this on your own. It's not a huge deal. If you have a word and it's kind of close, add K's, Q's, or J's to something so you have a unique keyword. But this is what you're looking for when you have a particular keyword and then you get these results in Google. Your search did not match any documents. You then want to use lorem ipsum. The reason I use lorem ipsum is because there's an outside chance that there could be LSI, latent semantic indexing, or other kind of words involved that could actually impact ranking, and so I use lorem ipsum so that I'm using something that is eliminating variables. Use good lorem ipsum, generate it each time, make sure it's unique. Don't start with the word lorem ipsum. It looks kind of like this, although you can see that this starts with lorem ipsum. Don't do that, but this is kind of what we're driving at. I use this generator, but there are a bunch out there that you can use, though, and that part really doesn't matter too much, but just get it so that it's reliable, it generates unique lorem ipsum for you. All right, then we set up the test. So you, like I said, you want to set up your pages exactly the same. The test page and the control page are going to be 100% identical. I usually create 5 pages for most tests, and that's so that we have room to see up or down movement. They all have the same lorem ipsum. They're identical in every way. The keywords are placed in identical places. So if you have an H1, you're going to have an H1 in all of them. And one little pro tip is that your meta titles need to be different so you can get your pages indexed. But really what that is you put your target keyword first and then some lorem ipsum type words behind it. And this is what your URL will look like. So it's like www.test.com/ that's your target keyword, and then hyphen random letters, and that's what you can use as your meta title as well. The stuff on the slash, the fake keyword, and then fake word. So again, so you've got your test page, it's got the fake keyword and the lorem ipsum. The control page has the fake keyword and the same amount of lorem ipsum. I actually get that question a lot. Do you put the same amount of lorem ipsum on? Yes, it's all exactly the same. The only difference then will be that one thing that you're testing. So if you are testing H1s, for example, the only difference between those 2 pages is going to be whatever you're testing in that H1. If you're testing meta titles, the only difference between the 2 pages would actually be their meta title and some form of that. Now, another important point is that you might have 9 ideas. That's 9 different tests. You don't want to kind of cross-pollinate results, because then your results won't be verifiable because you've got other variables in play. Each time you run a test, you want to create new test environments, new test pages. And the idea is that we're trying to just get down to that one variable. After that, you wait for the pages to index. You can use an indexer, because the idea is if you've done it to all the pages, then you're eliminating a variable. For indexing, you can publish all your links in a Google Doc. You can submit them to Google's URL submitter. You can put them in a link indexer. You can fetch in Google and Search Console. All those are fine. A note is there's no problem with duplicate content because we're only looking at one keyword. All the pages are the same. There are no documents existing in Google for that, so there's no penalty. And if there was a penalty, it's basically being applied to all the pages. Again, eliminating that particular variable. All right, in the end, after you've indexed your pages and you've introduced your the one thing you're testing, you view your results, and it actually feels like Christmas. It's a lot of fun. In the handout area, we've got some more tests for you, like what are the most important on-page factors? Should meta titles be the same or different from NH1? Is traffic a ranking factor? We tested some silo structuring, and does schema help your site rank? So you guys can check those out in the handout areas just on some other tests we run. You can kind of see what those results look like as well from the point of view of this is how these tests kind of go. All right, now to the good stuff, the SocialAdr tests. So does SocialAdr affect ranking? We want to see, is this a positive thing? Does this program actually have any positive effect? And in these tests, we set up 5 pages that are all identical. All the test pages were indexed. We observed the indexing and ranking order, and then either the second or third spot was chosen to receive the links from SocialAdr. And the reason that is so that we can see if there's up or down movement. That way we can see if something is a positive factor, a negative factor, or no factor. Quick question on the polls. Do you guys think that does SocialAdr, or does social bookmarking, if you will, as one of the things that SocialAdr does that help your site rank? So social bookmarking is one part of what SocialAdr does. There's the social kind of sites like your Facebooks and Twitters. Then there's the social bookmarking, which would be like Tumblr and Delicious and DGO and those kind of sites. And then there's some microblogging as well. But most are thinking yes. There's some not sure. Actually, a good chunk of not sure, so that's pretty cool. What I like, I'm going to close this poll so we can hit the next slide. Doing a quick Google search is always fun, and that's often how these things start for me is what do the experts say, or what do people say? And so I just did a thing like, are social bookmarks good for SEO? And what's hilarious is that you get a lot of different answers. It's minimal, but it's probably harmful. No, they don't do anything. The third one's always my favorite. It depends, and it's saying it's not a direct ranking factor, but it can bring traffic, and traffic is a ranking factor, or can be a ranking factor. And then you find one that gets good, do it. Here's how you should do it. And then I realized that article is from 2007. So pretty common, I'm sure, for anybody that has tried to look up anything in SEO, like should I do this or should I do that? This is basically what you get every time. What I found very interesting, though, in all those articles is that no one said, I know because I tested it. It was all heuristic based. It was all, I think this or I think that. And people didn't even list a correlation or a case study. It was just some sort of idea of why they thought it might or might not work, and then they kind of tell you that. And that's really what you see a lot in SEO. So test number 1, what we did here, so you can see our fake keyword. There are 386 links. We put the description that we put into the SocialAdr dashboard was lorem ipsum, so it's not English. We used the identical description for all posts, so we didn't use the spin tags feature that's built into the program. After the last link was posted, when we did it on just the regular feed, all links were submitted to a link indexer. And so after all, the number 2 page, this is the page that was chosen to receive the SocialAdr links. Immediately, within a couple days, it dropped down to the number 4 spot, and this indicates transitional rank. This is the Google dance, and you can see it within the test, and we see this all the time in testing. But within a week, after everything was done, it ramped up to the number 1 position, which is where it stayed. And that was at the conclusion of all the links running through the link indexer as well. So very happy on the first one. So even though there was an initial drop, that's not unusual. That's called transitional rank, or that's what is often called the Google dance. And we see that a lot once you introduce a variable into a test environment or even a live environment, that's when you see a shakeup in the SERPs, and that's the dance. And so within this, it's a positive sign to see that when you introduce something like SocialAdr, that we see the dance, then we know we're dealing with a factor. At that point, then we need to see if it's a positive factor or a negative factor. And what we saw after all the links were indexed was that positive factor moved up to number 1. So test 1's a win.
Hey Kyle, can I jump in here real quick with a story?
Of course.
So I mentioned this briefly in my first email that I sent out about this webinar, but I didn't know before these guys started running this test that they were even going to run a test. And the first I heard about it was Dory sent me an email, and it must have been partway through the test, must have been during the Google Dance part of it, because the information that I got from her was that the rankings dropped when they ran SocialAdr on test pages. And I thought, oh my gosh, not something that I want to hear. And it was a little bit of a nail biter there for a few days, because we were, I'm like, all right, well, can we get the data? Can we see what's going on? Can we see how you did the tests? And then, by the time I guess we got the stuff together and I heard back, stuff had popped back up, and all of a sudden the story had changed. But it was definitely a little bit of a drop in the stomach for a second there when we said, oh, we officially tested it, and it definitely drops rankings.
And what's interesting though is like that's that translates to real life too, just even outside of the test environment. You do something to a money site, and all of a sudden the site drops, like 20 spots or out of ranking. It's like, oh my God, what did I just do? But what was interesting too is part of the test process is that as we're watching this data happening, then we start to think about what the next test would be as a result. Is the idea, why would this drop? Is this just transitional rank? Is this going to lock in? Or is there an issue there? And our first thought was that it was with duplicate content, that because we're using the same lorem ipsum and we didn't spin it, that might be causing the drop in rank. And so as we kind of ramp up these other tests, to get other tests going, that was actually the very next variation on this test that we ran to see if perhaps that was part of the issue. And so in test 2, what we did was we used real English and the spin tax feature. What I noticed is that I had just copied and pasted the English that we put in, and there was some code in there. So when I hit to spin, some HTML code popped up, like when you see the HTML code for like the word and there's like an ampersand in there and some other things. And then also there were some apostrophes that were added, and they looked kind of weird. When I saw that, I actually decided to leave in on this test because I was kind of assuming that the novice user might do that. Or maybe the lazy user, the idea of somebody that's just kind of putting in, clicking it, and then just kind of sending it, not really caring. And I wanted to kind of see how that went. But also, though, to see if perhaps that drop that we were seeing wasn't transitional rank, but might have had to do with duplicate content being used, or the exact same description, the exact same lorem ipsum description. So the biggest is, as I said, between 2 and 1, doing it as a novice, but then doing it with real English. In order to use the spin feature and actually get a spin, we need to use English. Lorem ipsum doesn't spin that well. And all links were left as is. We also didn't use a link indexer. That was also a concern when we were kind of putting that into place. So a link indexer wasn't used. After all the pages were indexed, we chose the one in the number 3 spot. And a few days later, it completely disappeared from listings. In the dance, it just completely dropped out. There was a previously unranked page that showed up. Sometimes pages just don't show when you're kind of running tests. So we had the 5 before, we kind of let it sit for a while and then went forward with the test. Actually, and as soon as we introduced the SocialAdr links, that one actually popped up and our test page disappeared. 2 days later, it reappeared, and it actually reappeared higher into the number 2 spot. And it stayed there for a bit. And then 3 weeks later, boom, top spot. No extra shares. It was time to get to that in that 3 weeks to get up to the number 1 spot. So once again, we saw a dance before it hit its final rank. So we saw the transitional rank, and that transitional rank was out of the index, back into the index a little bit higher, and then ultimately into its number 1 spot. what was nice here too is even without using a link indexer, there was still positive movement, and it ultimately went to number 1. What we're thinking on this is fix any errors, make sure you've got nicely spun content. And we're thinking also that the time is an issue at this point. If you need fast results, then I would consider using a link indexer. But if you don't necessarily need them this moment, they will get there and it's more natural. You can do that. It's just going to take maybe that 3 to 4 weeks. In the last test, what we wanted to look at was spinning it and the time. So we had our 301 links. The description was English. We spun it and we cleaned it up, and we also made sure it was readable and good. No link indexer was used. As stated, so this represents a unique and readable descriptions, not submitted to a link indexer, so we're just, at this point in the test, because we're feeling pretty good, we're not freaking out, we're going to let it sit. After all the pages were indexed, we chose the number 3 spot to get the links, and that's the one. They were pointed there. The following day, it jumped up to the number 2 spot, and that was interesting because, most in the other 2 tests in the dance, they dropped, but this moved up to number 2. Shortly thereafter, about a day or so, it actually returned to that number 3 spot and remained there for a couple weeks, and then boom, number 1 spot. And we didn't add any extra links after the 301 were put in. We let it go after that, and there was not a link indexer used as well. It was literally the time. So the important point here is things take time. It's not uncommon to see that in link building at all. Usually with link building, it takes 2 weeks anyway to see anything, and it can take up to 10 to 12 weeks for links that you build to have any kind of impact. Here in the test environment, we're seeing 3 to 4 weeks. So something to keep in mind is that if you're building these kind of links in your own practice, it can take that long. It could even take longer. In these test environments, there aren't any other factors coming in. These links are the only factors in play. So when you think about a live environment where there are other factors that need to be crunched in the algorithm, it could take even longer than for these links to have any impact, because they're going to queue up in terms of when Google's running its algorithm, and as things are crawled, it could take even longer. A very important point as well is transitional rank is random, and Google's even said this. When you read the patent on transitional rank, it says that it's random. More often than not, we see transitional rank as a drop, and we see sites just take a nosedive, and that's usually as an SEO where your heart stops. That's usually what we see, but it's important to understand that transitional rank can even go up, as we saw here, and transitional rank can even be nothing. That's the point of random, is that it can go up or down. So when you see immediate results, sit tight, in the sense of they may or may not be the results that you're looking for, because you still could be within that transitional rank. But at any rate, in all these things, all the sites are now locked in the number 1 spot. They haven't moved, and they've stayed there for weeks, so we feel really good about those rankings. We're out of the transitional rank is what I'm saying there, but sit tight if you see things moving around. So, very happy to say that it gets the thumbs up. This would be an awkward webinar. Sorry.
Right? That's what that first email from Dory, I was thinking, how am I supposed to mail out a webinar where I jump on and talk about how this tool makes your rankings drop? I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work.
Ben, good news, bad news. And actually, the thing that was great too is you being a good sport about it. I can see people being like, so here's the deal, we're going to run a test, and we could get good results or bad results. Are you in? And you being in is super cool. But for our best practices, this is how we do it. And as I mentioned before, I do client-side SEO as well, and so this is actually how I'm using it. You wanted to have at least 275 SocialAdr links. That seems pretty obvious. Testing your niche. And also keep in mind this is a test environment, so you might need more. I would guess that you're going to need more. Use well-spun, unique descriptions. Make sure you take out all the errors. If you really need to speed up results, I think you can use a link indexer, and I don't think it's going to harm you. People have different feelings about link indexers. I don't think it's a necessary component, but it's something you can do, like if you're really maybe behind the 8 ball. And then the thing to keep in mind is that results really will take some time. I think 3+ weeks is more than reasonable, and taking it into a live environment, I would anticipate it taking even longer. So it's the kind of thing like if you start up a campaign, and even after it ends, and maybe you've even used a link indexer, you'd be like, oh man, this thing it's been 3 weeks or 4 weeks and nothing's happened. Sit tight, because I think you can still see that positive result several weeks later even. So it's not the kind of thing there really aren't any programs or anything in SEO where you see overnight results, which actually I think is part of Google's algorithm anyway, where they don't want you to be able to game it and see results instantly. And so I can see that stuff like this, that's really what we see in links. It just takes some time. So keep that in mind when you're running a campaign. It's going to take a little bit of time, but the results will get there, or you will get positive ranking signals out of it. Winning. So this is why we do it. If somebody asks me, social bookmarks good for SEO? Yes. Yeah, you can get a positive ranking signal out of it. Does SocialAdr work? I've heard they do social bookmarks. Yes, it does. And I can say that because I've tested it. So a little bit about us. Unless Ben, did you want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, so before we move on past this, I think there's a few questions maybe we can address on the specifics of this before we go forward.
Do you want to just read them out?
Yeah, I'm just going to scan back here. So one person asked about how the bookmarks were delivered, if they were like dripped, or did you just order them all at once? You put them in the normal and just let them go?
Yeah, I put it in normal and let it go.
Okay, so they were just delivered, over the course of, I'm trying to think of what the speed is for 275, and it's probably delivered over the course of a few days, something like that.
And actually, I think a couple of them took almost 2 weeks to get up to that.
Well, there we go. Okay, so yeah, so running on the normal, just kind of overtime thing turned out to work pretty well here.
And then, like on the one that went through a link indexer, that was at least another week, if you will, to get all those links pinged. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. There was a question back here. Let's see, Gil, I think, did we answer your question about how long the drop was, or maybe we didn't cover that? Kyle, when stuff disappeared, how long was it like gone out of the rankings, or how long was it?
It was a matter of days. I think we've got it on the. It was only gone for a day, maybe 2. Yeah, the day later it popped back up.
Okay.
But that wasn't a fun day.
Right.
But the other thing too is like, okay, it returned and it's in the number 3 spot, and then it just locked in there, and it was there for a couple weeks. And at that point, we're like, okay. And then you're watching it, but that's actually just part of the transitional rank. Its transitional rank was to drop for a minute and then just stay put back to its original spot.
So there's a question here. Do you suggest doing links to inner pages or index page, or both?
So for these tests, these were going to inner pages. It's the kind of thing, what would make sense? If you've got an inner page that has a blog post, if you will, that had content that you could see being shared, that makes sense to me to do that. I always try to do things as to what makes sense. Would it make sense for your homepage to blow up randomly? Maybe not. Especially if you haven't done anything recent. Like not an update or new content or anything like that.
All right, let's see. There's another one of those same questions. So there's somebody that's asking in here about indexing. He's saying that he's done some, he's got some pages that weren't getting indexed even with running SocialAdr links. Do you have any ideas or suggestions of other things to check of why that might be the case?
I'm sorry, so the question was the campaign was run but there was no movement?
Well, actually it looks like campaign was run and the pages weren't indexed even.
Oh, and all the ones that I ran, I ended up with, because we've got the test environment, and so that's 5 pages. We would end up with 4 to 5 pages of Google results that all contain the SocialAdr links, and they were indexing for the target keyword simply because it was, on that particular page. So
right.
I'm not 100% sure. If one way to get links indexed is to put them into a Google Doc and publish it. I would give that a try. If you ran them through an indexer, maybe it was just the indexer didn't do anything for you.
Yeah, seems reasonable. So let's see. A couple people are asking about just like number. How confident are we about like the minimum, and or do we feel like there's a maximum number where this becomes a problem?
I would say I'm I'm sure there probably is a maximum. But for these kind of things, when I personally use things for link velocity, I kind of again think in terms of what would be natural or what would be normal. It's easy to see something blowing up for a little bit and then kind of going off. The other point too is that think about your own niche. If this was a test environment, so there's nothing else there, and then when these links come in, they're the only factor. In your own niche, you're going after pages that are probably having SEO done to them. There are a lot of links coming in. This is going to be one factor for you.
Right. Yeah, it's not going to be as neat and tidy as a...
Yeah, this isn't the silver bullet, like this is the only thing you have to do and then you're going to rank. This is a piece of the puzzle.
Whoa, hey.
But it's
You're trying to decide between the names SocialAdr or Silver Bullet, so...
But when you're looking for what can I do that's going to be positive, that will be a positive thing, this is something that I would add to the tool belt.
So Dave's asking about how to handle creating enough unique content even with spun text. So Dave, in the first test, if I'm remembering this correctly, Kyle, in the first test you didn't even use unique or spinning, right? Like you just sent every single link out with exact duplicate content and it was fine.
That's right. And I think so. In S.I.A. we've actually done a lot of testing with duplicate content. Where you run into problems with duplicate content or when you have an entire article and that entire article is pointing back to the same article. That's where we're seeing duplicate content problems. But when you're dealing with a blurb, and especially like a spun blurb, we're not seeing any duplicate content issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty normal, right? When people are linking to things or people are curating content, it's always going to be the title of the title of the article and maybe the first
paragraph, or the lead.
Typical, yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense to me, especially when somebody think about how social bookmarks work. Somebody's saying like, "Hey, I found this cool piece of content, and here's a blurb." Even if it's done completely naturally, that's what they're going to be doing.
Makes sense. I just want to share something. Chuck has been kind of sending me some info here. So he says that he has tested 50 sites and thousands of pages for a few years with SocialAdr. And I guess just to kind of distill what he's saying, the primary recommendation he's making is that you don't try to overload it right away, that you start, with the kind of the way you guys did it, with things basically on drip, and let the stuff kind of come in over time and build up before trying to blast a bunch of stuff in at once. And he says he's had a lot of success with doing that, especially if you're using good content that you're linking to and that you're using for spins.
I think for sure, because if you think about any natural situation, even if something were to go viral, even in a small sense, what are you talking about? You're talking about a few hundred things, really, at most, in any kind of situation. So it makes sense to me that, that's what you should be shooting for. Shoot for natural.
Apparently I didn't sufficiently emphasize that he's been getting mind-blowing results. Let's see. Hello is asking if you can use SocialAdr on a plain web page or does it have to be blog? No, any kind of page is fine. It definitely doesn't need to be a blog. There's a few people that are asking about link indexers, starting with, if this had been a poll, we would definitely have a few people clicking the what is a link indexer, so maybe you can talk just a little bit about that.
Sure. A link indexer is simply a tool where you can provide a URL and it pings Google. It says, hey Google, hey Google, hey Google, hey Google, until Google goes and crawls the page. That's all that it is. Some people have a little heartburn about them because it seems unnatural. Why is this link being pinged? I've never run into any problems with it. But if you don't like using that like a third-party tool, Google has its own indexer, and that's the Google URL Submit. And you can simply Google that, Google URL Submitter, and then you can actually put in a link, hit go, and Google will crawl it. There's the same feature also in Search Console for fetch or fetch and render. If you put in a particular link on your site and click fetch or fetch and render, Google will go and crawl that site or crawl that page. So.
Yeah, one of the things that I just want to kind of point out here to the question about link indexing and the question about the unique content that Dave asked, one of the things that has always been a design goal for us with SocialAdr is that things would just work even if you didn't really spend the time to figure out the best way to do it, or even if you didn't spend the time to like highly optimize. We really wanted, because I'm really lazy, and so I like things that work the way that I would want them to work. So the design goal has always been to have a tool that if you were really lazy, you could do the minimal amount of work and it would get results for you. And so, the final kind of recommendation that we came across here to use, unique content and to run the link indexer and stuff like that, those are sort of optimizations, but at the end of the day, the test showed that even without doing unique content and even without doing the link indexer, you're still going to get great results, and that's pretty gratifying to know that we're kind of hitting what I would consider our prime directive in terms of building a tool that's just super simple and works.
Definitely right on.
All right, well let's talk a little bit more about S.I.A. quick.
Sure thing. So S.I.A, SEO Intelligence Agency, what we do is test. That's really all we do. We recently just had our 50th test. And there's actually a lot that goes into that, because one test is actually usually many tests, but kind of 50 topics, if you will. Why I do this, a little quick story about me. So several years ago, I started a web design and development company with my brother, and we were outsourcing a lot of the grunt work on that to India. And then we got the bright idea. I was like, well, why don't we just go to India and open up a company there? And my brother was like, capital idea. So we go to India and we open up a company. And everything's going fine. We're in the foothills of the Himalayas. It's this nice little spot. We've got a staff of 8, and things are humming along. And I flew back to the U.S. My brother was there. And then one day we got a knock on the door, and it was the police. And the police asked to see our business license. And we were told that we would get a shakedown. It's not really an if but a when, and so we prepared for that. And my brother showed our papers and our business licenses, and they asked to see his visa, and he showed that. And they said, these are the wrong papers, come with us. So we get to my brother gets to the police station, and the police chief is like, look, these might be the right papers, they might be the wrong papers, I don't know. But here's your options. You can stay in jail and wait for the magistrate to come and sort this out, or you can leave town tomorrow. And my brother was like, well, when's the magistrate supposed to come? And the police chief was like, I don't know. So my brother was like, I would like option B, and I would like to leave town. So my brother packed up and left town, and we stayed in touch with our neighbor, and our neighbor told us that the police then came in and took all of our stuff, all of our computers, all of our equipment and furniture, and our landlord took our 6-month deposit, did not return it, and had a tenant in the place 2 days later. So I had invested about $30,000 in this, and it was a time in my life when I had approximately $31,000. And we're now hemorrhaging clients, and we had recently started some SEO packages, and my brother, who does development, he took some of the clients that he could just take on himself, and I was kind of left with the SEO clients, and I realized I needed to become an SEO expert immediately in order to take care of myself and feed my family and pay the bills and whatnot. And so I kind of ran into the spot of how do you become an SEO expert, and so step one is I went and followed other experts, looking to see what they're doing and what's going on, what advice they give, and how do you do this or how do you do that. And I immediately noticed a problem that you could have 3 or 4 industry experts, and they're going to give you 3 to 4 pieces of advice that's contradictory. Or sometimes they give you advice and it's pretty vague. Or you get one that gives you really good advice and it's on point, but then you go to apply it and you've got a situation that's slightly different. And it's like, well, what do I do in this situation? So then I went out and purchased some programs. The idea is that, okay, that's fine, let's go get this done. And you might get a checklist. And what I realized is that this checklist has like 50 things in it. And I was like, well, do I need to do all these 50 things? Is this the actual thing? Have these been tested by this expert? Is this just busy work? Is there something in here that's actually a factor and something that isn't? Or do you need these things? What's going on? And I realized, I don't know that any of these things have been tested. These 50 things might actually end up in a positive result, but I'm thinking about, is there anything scientific behind it? And I'm also thinking, only have so much time. I only have so much time and so much budget. If I can cut some of this out, that's all the better, because then I can take on more clients, I can be effective, and get the job done, and have a profitable business. Or even if you're doing it for your own website, the idea of you don't have all the time in the day. You only have so much time that you can invest in your site, and are all these things necessary? And that's when I started testing. This is Dory's line, think outside the flock. But that's when I realized that, well, I need to start testing. And something that was interesting is that I kind of thought, when you read other people's blogs and people that seem to have figured it out, I was kind of thinking that I think everybody's testing. And that's how they're coming to their conclusions, because I was kind of thinking, like, everybody seems to know all these things, and I've been reading all these blogs, and I've got these programs, but I don't feel like I know. And then that's kind of how I got into the idea of testing. I figured, well, I think everybody's doing that. And then I kind of realized that they're not. Not in the sense of where they're taking things down to single variables and really getting up or down or yes or no's on algorithm factors and ranking factors. And that's kind of then how S.I.A. got born, was in the idea of, hey, let's get together, let's get a group together. I can run some tests, I can show what these tests are, and then we can have an environment where people can talk about it, people can run their own tests, I can assist them in running their tests and get those things set up. And that's the SEO Intelligence Agency, and there's the sign up. But basically, like I said, it's a small group of people, and the whole point of this is to actually find answers. The language that we avoid is I think, or I heard. Those are good starting points. That's the point where we look at, that's forming the hypothesis. But for us, we want to go the next step and then identify how to test that thing and then actually test it. And really our goal here is to have a legitimate set of industry best practices, and not just like best practices, but these are real things. Because the other thing that we find too is this isn't a factor. This isn't something you need to do. We find that just as much as we find actual ranking factors. And so kind of that's what we're kind of focusing in on. Just wanted to show real quick, so this is the URL, but what that kind of looks like is on this page here, just so you can get some more information. I'm not going to read through this, but this is here, so there's a short video on what we're doing. There's a longer video of me talking if you really love the sound of my voice and can't get enough of me. There's more of me there. But in a nutshell, what we're doing here is we're testing and reporting. And each month you get my tests that I've run, or other people in the group that are doing tests under my supervision. We put those results together, and you can kind of see what's going on. These are some of the things that we've got going on. How long should things be? Top 10 places to put a keyword, link sources, what are the best 2.0s. This is actually something that I really like, because if you're building links, probably something that you're doing is building Web 2.0s, like your Tumblrs or your WordPresses or those kind of things. Which are the best ones? And if you're looking at, I have time to build 5 of these, and there are 50 options, which are the 5 I should go at? And so we kind of looked at, in a death match, which are the strongest ones. And you can go through this at your leisure. I also really like this one on local and e-commerce URL structure. When you're looking at building links and how you should put your links together for particular pages, what kind of structure should I use? Because if you use something out of the box, like from WooCommerce, they throw words in like product, or you'll see kind of random folders that categorize things. Are those good? Should you have categorization folders, or should you not? And so we kind of jump into stuff like that. Down at the bottom here, a couple things. SEO myth busting. As part of the group, people can actually submit myths. Hey, I heard this. Can we test it? And that's where a lot of the tests come from. Closing your client, and there's actually someone in the group that's mentioned this, and I do this in my own practice actually, is that I distinguish my services from people that don't test. I always tell clients or prospective clients, the thing that distinguishes me from other SEOs is that I actually test things. And I even test things when clients have questions. where I can say everybody's been in that situation where a client asks a particular question like, should I do A or should I do B? Or even if you're doing SEO for your own site, you're thinking like, okay, I see two valid things here. Should I do A or should I do B? The right answer there is don't guess, test it. And that's what we do in these situations, and that's what I do for clients, and what I go in, and then it just makes sense because the idea is that you save time, you save money, you save resources. You're not guessing anymore on what should be done. You're just you're putting in actionable intelligence into play, and you're going to feel a lot better about it. You're not going to be like, oh, should we do A or B? I think A, and then do it and cross your fingers. It's like, okay, we should do A, and here's why, and then you can put it into place. And these are some other things that you can kind of go through that we've done. If you join us, if you want to be part of our group, you get the results. You get a pretty snazzy binder. It's actually pretty cool. We do monthly webinars, one a month, and then I also do weekly webinars where if anybody has any questions about any of the tests that have been printed, or they have questions about anything in SEO, I actually do a weekly webinar where you can ask any of the questions. We also have Facebook and Skype groups that are pretty popular that people are involved in. And then some alerts. So like if things are going on, we'll send out emails. And also kind of update some tests too, like, hey, this changed or that changed. These are embarrassing to read, but eye-opening case study and the value that they received. Again, viable, that they were able to implement. This one was really cool that we got actually shortly after we released the first couple dossiers, in moving from 8 to 6 on a super competitive term by being able to change a couple things on page and actually move a couple spots. And as we know, if you can move a couple spots on the first page, that can bring a lot of clicks. And then the other one too, moving from page 2 up to the number 6 spot, using for another competitive term or very competitive term. That's actionable, and that's real money. And what's nice about that is where the person can take the stuff that we've shown, like, hey, this is a ranking factor, this is what you can do, and actually just put it into play. And then this one, this actually really makes me happy too, because again, I do this in my own practice, and it's something that I talk about, is that you can take this information and distinguish yourself in your practice as doing what a professional does. These are tests, these are applicable to the particular pitch or that particular client, and this is what we can do, and this is why we do it. And then there's also a framework, so then if the client comes back and say, hey, I've actually got some questions about this, that, or the other, you don't have to guess, or you don't have to be like, oh, I'm not really sure. You can be like, actually, you know what, there's a lot of conflicting evidence about that. We can actually test it and figure out which is the right answer. And then you're actually really bringing value to the client, because you're going to be providing test results that only they're getting, and they know that, and then they're going to have an industry edge. There's a picture of the binder. This is kind of what it looks like. We actually mail it to you, so you get it out there, and you can put it in. There's also, this just launched a new members area, because we realized thumbing through the dossiers can be tedious, especially if you're looking for one thing. Oh, what was that, or what that one particular thing. So there's a members area where you can go in and get quick access to answers, and also the Friday chats and webinars are easily accessed as well. In this dashboard, what we're then actually doing is taking the information and putting it into different areas, on page, off page, this, that, or the other, so that when you're looking for information about a particular category, you can actually go and see if there have been tests done there and what those tests are showing. The Facebook group is closed, and actually this is kind of fun because this screenshot was just taken, but you can see in the post, there's a post about rank brain. And so what we're doing there is that Google said that's the number 3 ranking signal, and so we just started this discussion. What is rank brain doing? And then the idea is that if we can figure out what it might be doing, then we can work on tests. Now, I'm not saying we figured out rank brain, because we haven't, but the idea is that this is a place where you can discuss those kind of things, what it may or may not be doing, and then the idea is that if we can identify that, we can probably figure out a way to test it. And so that's, I think, actually from yesterday. And so that's what we're working on. And in the next couple dossiers, those are the kind of tests that we're going to be focusing on. So if we see if we can identify some rank brain attributes and test them. And again, the point, the 50 test doesn't mean that's not a different checklist. A lot of the stuff is don't do this, or this doesn't work. But the idea is to be results oriented. Some of the stuff is kind of heady. Some of the stuff is really just right on it. But so depending on where you are in SEO or what your needs are, we do try to cover a lot of different things. And then that's us, SEOintelligenceagency.com/join SIA.
I did drop that link in the box too, so people can click it instead of having to, type it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and this is the unsell. I mean, it's not a hard sell. If this sounds something that's cool, that you want to be involved in this kind of a thing, that's awesome, and we want to have you on board. If it sounds like the worst thing ever, don't worry about it. I think to get in, it's $279 for the first month, $279, and then it's $99 a month after that. You do get access to those tests in the members area and the Skype group and the Facebook group, and also like the Friday chat. So I mean, if you join today, you can talk to me tomorrow on my Friday chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I enjoy the ideas that people have, because even so, I've got tests and I run those and all that, but then some people have come up with some great ideas and some really cool tests, and we kind of jump in and do those. So yeah, that's it. I don't know, do people have questions? Did any questions pop up?
Not too much about that. We'll give everybody here a second to ask. I mean, what I really like about this is, I think everybody who is sitting here should have a pretty good idea of the value this provides, because we just sat through exactly what it is that's being delivered in the S.I.A. anyway. So, and speaking as someone who was on the receiving end of a great review of how this thing's worked out, I really I definitely can see how valuable this would be. I don't currently do any agency stuff, but we do have, we do run some SEO for some of my other products, and we've got a number of other products and brands and companies, and we're definitely doing, we're definitely looking for what we should be doing these days, because it's tough to find the good info. So I know that I appreciate having real answers as well. So.
Yeah, right on. Well, thank you.
All right. Kyle, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it, and thank you for validating SocialAdr.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it.
And for everybody else, I am going to mail out a recording of this, so if you missed part of it, or if you need to go through some of this again to kind of get the details on it, you can do that. And then I will also be including a coupon code for SocialAdr with that, so you can take advantage of these findings right away. So keep an eye out for that tomorrow.
Excellent. And thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.